Good evening, this is AWANI Tonight and I'm Soraya Mia. Ismail Sabri made Deputy Prime Minister while Hishammuddin a Senior Minister. And stepping up for climate, the catalyst for change starts with young people. That's coming up. Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin appointed Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob as his deputy and Datuk Sri Hishammuddin Hussein as a senior minister. The Prime Minister's office said in a statement today that both appointments had been presented to the Yang di-Pertuan Agong and were effective immediately.
It said Ismail Sabri would continue holding his defence portfolio, while Hishammuddin had been made Senior Foreign Affairs Minister and would take over the security cluster previously headed by Ismail Sabri. The appointment of a Deputy Prime Minister fills the void that had existed in the cabinet since the collapse of the Pakatan Harapan government in February last year. It also comes after several meetings among UMNO MPs and cabinet members, which saw them rejecting a proposal by their president, Datuk Sri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi, to take the party out of the government. Hishammuddin now joins three other senior ministers, Datuk Sri Muhammad Azmin Ali, Datuk Dr. Razi Jidin and Datuk Sri Fadilah Yusof.
How successful will the appointments of Ismail Sabri and Hishammuddin Hussein be in stabilizing the PN coalition? Tonight on Consider This, we speak to our guests about UMNO's next maneuvers. The European Union has clarified today that anybody who received COVID-19 vaccines authorized by its member countries are allowed to enter the bloc. This means that AstraZeneca jabs used in Malaysia are valid for travel approval to EU countries, contrary to earlier reports.
A local portal previously reported that the EU digital COVID certificate only recognized EU-approved shots for travel within the bloc. In the statement today, EU said reports concerning the origins of AstraZeneca vaccine is inaccurate, adding that its member states have also lifted travel restrictions for those who received COVID vaccines that are yet to be approved by the EU, as long as the manufacturers have gone through the World Health Organization's emergency use listing process. The bloc added that the digital certificate is not a prerequisite for travelling in the EU or a compulsory document, but simply a practical tool.
Studies by the Medical Research Institute found that two self-test devices that use saliva for COVID-19 screening have sensitivity levels of above 90%. Health Director General Tan Sri Dr. Nur Hisham Abdullah said the details on the guidelines for the use of the self-test kits were expected to be ready next week. In May, Dr. Nur Hisham said that there were two companies offering the test kit for sale at local pharmacies. He said through the use of the saliva test kits, individuals won't need to go to health facilities to make an initial screening to detect the virus. The government agreed in principle to dispose part of the Felda settlers' loan amounting to 8.3 billion ringgit as an initiative to revive the 65-year-old organization.
Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin said the disposal of the loans, which would be implemented through a conditional loan adjustment initiative, would reduce the burden of each settler by an average of 80%. The average loan repayment is expected to be reduced from around 800 to 1,000 ringgit to only 250 to 300 ringgit a month for oil palm settlers and as low as 150 ringgit for rubber settlers.
The harsh impacts of climate change will be inevitable to future generations. Therefore, CEO of World Go Green Council, Chesney American, said it is important for the youth today to take a proactive measure when it comes to climate change. She said as previous generations have lesser time on Earth, the impacts of climate change may not be as significant as it should be to the youth who have their whole lives ahead of them.
It's going to affect them directly. Basically, you know, the baby boomers, the ones that are living right now, they maybe have 30 to 50 years left. But for the youth, they have 70 years. That, you know, so they're looking ahead into the future, what the 70-year future is going to be. So it's really important for them to care, because a lot of people just don't care. we only recently, maybe in the last 2 years, stopped using plastic, or you stopped using plastic straws. But even that small change affects the world. So again, with the youth, even a small awareness or change in even educating them about what climate change is will actually help them be advocates for going greener.
According to Shezni, the solution to climate change lies in science and technology. This is why education on the science of climate change is key to equip the younger generations to explore solutions to combat climate change.
Maybe simple terms of like how photosynthesis works and how CO2 gets into the environment, and how right now we just has too much CO2, and we have that blanket of CO2 which causes the global warming. So keeping it very simple and easy to understand will help them then realize that through maybe innovating science and technology, they can actually be the ones that create the solutions, because they're teaching kids from like 2 years old to even start coding, and even like learning about the science of climate change. So I think that's something that's really important for them to be aware about that, and that they can make a difference.
This is part of the World Go Green Council's advocacy work, which aims to balance the effects of climate change and the shift towards bioenergy resources, as well as reduce overall carbon emissions. We'll take a short break. Stay with us.
Lebih sukar untuk COVID menjangkit kita.
Untuk tempoh 2 minggu ni duduk di rumah. Kalau kita boleh laksanakan KKP Kendiri dan keluarga,
saya kira insya-Allah kita boleh berjaya. Akhirnya kita menang.
Perang COVID-19 masih belum berakhir. Dalam kita berusaha memutuskan rantaian wabak ini, kita jangan terpedaya dengan virus maklumat palsu. Simak fakta melalui www.astroawani.com atau aplikasi Astro Awani. Teruskan berdisiplin, ratakan lengkungan pandemik ini.
The third wave of COVID-19 has taken us by storm. There's no room to take anything lightly. Everyone must follow all the steps to stop the spread of COVID-19. Social distancing, face masks, follow these steps, this SOP with the utmost discipline. Together, we can flatten the curve.
Kini berwajib.
Welcome back. The president of Haiti, Jovenel Moïse, has been killed in an attack on his private residence early Tuesday morning. Interim Prime Minister Claude Joseph made this announcement today. He said the president's residence in Port-au-Prince was stormed by unidentified armed men at around 1 a.m. The First Lady was also wounded in the attack and is currently hospitalized. Joseph said that all measures had been taken to guarantee the continuance of the state. Singapore has excluded those who received Sinovac shots from its national COVID-19 vaccination count. Its health minister, Ong Ki-yung, said the decision was made following inadequate efficacy data for the Chinese-made vaccine, especially against the contagious Delta variant.
Only people who participated in the national immunization program, which currently uses Moderna and Pfizer-BioNTech shots, are counted in the tally for vaccinations. Sinovac's CoronaVac shot is not part of Singapore's national vaccination program, but was allowed to be used in designated private clinics following an emergency use approval by the World Health Organization. Singapore has set a target for 2/3 of its people to be fully vaccinated by around August 9th. More than 3.7 million, or 65% of its population, have received at least one dose of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines, and nearly 2.2 million have received 2 doses.
Lockdown in Sydney, Australia is extended for another week as authorities seek to curb an outbreak of the Delta variant. This after New South Wales reported a further 27 cases in the last 24 hours. The lockdown measures, which include stay-at-home orders and school closures, is expected to end on July 16. The Sydney outbreak has so far seen 357 cases since the first case linked to a limousine driver who tested positive on June 16th. Australia's COVID-0 approach has seen a series of snap lockdowns in cities across the country and its international borders closed for the last 15 months. Meanwhile, Australia's vaccination drive has fallen well behind initial schedule as only 9% of Australian adults are fully vaccinated, heightening fears that the highly contagious Delta variant could quickly spread beyond control. Since the pandemic began, Australia has detected just over 30,000 COVID-19 cases and 910 deaths. Meanwhile, the Indonesian government has expanded its lockdown to more areas of the country. This as the country reported record-high daily new cases and deaths of over 1,000. The current lockdown, which runs till July 20th, previously only covered the most populous island of Java and Bali. Some 200 million people will be affected by the expanded lockdown. The new restrictions would apply to dozens of cities extending from Sumatra Island in the west to easternmost Papua. Though areas affected by extended restrictions have much lower daily case counts than COVID epicenter Java, where Jakarta is, limited healthcare services in those regions are already under strain, and an explosion in cases could bring them to their knees. Meanwhile, Australia said it would donate oxygen-related equipment to Indonesia, facing a shortage of supplies from the high number of COVID cases. These include cylinders and concentrators, antigen test kits, and 2.5 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Indonesia is currently battling a surge in COVID-19 infections, fueled by the more infectious Delta variant. South Korea reported more than 1,200 new COVID-19 cases in the past 24 hours, the highest daily cases since late December. The country is battling a fourth wave of the pandemic, also fueled by the Delta variant.
Movement curbs will be extended in the capital Seoul and surrounding regions for at least another week as authorities consider pushing restrictions back up to the highest level. Prime Minister Kim Bo-kyum said the contagious Delta variant was spreading rapidly, especially among unvaccinated people in their 20s and 30s. He urged people in that demographic to get tested preemptively. Just 10% of the country's population of 52 million people have been fully vaccinated, while 30% have received at least one shot.
In other news, the World Health Organization has recommended using 2 types of arthritis drugs for treating severe and critical COVID patients. This after data showed that the drugs reduce the risk of death and the need for ventilators among hospitalized patients.
The WHO recommended using arthritis drugs Actemra from Roche and Kevzara from Sanofi to treat COVID-19 patients. Data from some 11,000 patients showed administering one of the drugs, in addition to corticosteroids, reduced the risk of death by 17% compared to the use of corticosteroids alone. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration last week issued emergency use approval for Actemra for COVID-19 treatment.
Phuket announced the first tourists positive for COVID-19 today. The person arrived yesterday under the Phuket Sandbox scheme that allowed the southern island province to reopen on July 1st. The man from the United Arab Emirates arrived in a tour group on Tuesday and was found to be positive after conducting a swab test at Phuket International Airport. Other tourists in the same group were placed under 14-day quarantine at a hotel provided for observation and COVID testing. From July 1st to 7, a total of 2,113 tourists had arrived in Phuket under the Sandbox program. That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news updates on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and Astro AWANI app. I'm Soraya Mia. We'll see you again.